Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry for the delay. We were having some technical difficulties there, but they seem to have been resolved. Welcome to the August 31st meeting of the Economic Development Committee. We have a quorum. I am calling the meeting to order. So the first item, we will have public comment, but I do want to approve our minutes first from our last meeting, which was July 28th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Yes. Ms. Lindwall?
Sure, I will make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All right. Mr. Salmasak, would you call the roll?
I will. We have, I believe, one member who is on Zoom. 1, 2, 3, 4. Correct. I think, is it Alderman or Councilmember Braithwaite?
Yes, Paul.
I'm going to start calling the roll on the minutes. So I'm going to call you first.
You got it.
Member
I'm an aye.
Thank you. Member Lindwall.
Aye.
Member Deacon.
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Member Ogawa.
Aye.
And Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Is there anybody on the Zoom that I've missed?
Okay, the minutes are approved. So our first item of business is our public comment. We have 3 people signed up, and when I call your name, if you could come up to the podium, that would be wonderful. First is Susan Kelly.
We're a team.
Okay. Peter Kelly, would you like to join her?
Yes. Okay. All right.
Okay, or would you like to go in series?
Apparently in series.
Okay, all right.
All right.
Welcome.
So my name is Susan Kelly. My husband Peter and I are Evanston residents, and I am here tonight to advocate in support of Northlight Theater's request for $2 million so that they are able to accelerate their building of a theater in downtown Evanston. Can you hear me?
Just
Okay.
fine, thank you.
Perfect. To be clear, we have no economic or employment relationship with Northlight. We are simply audience members who are tired of spending our entertainment dollars in Skokie. We believe Northlight can be a catalyst to attract more people to downtown Evanston. When more people come, more people spend money. In fact, the Chicago Tribune cites a figure that in Chicago, for every dollar spent on a live theater ticket, it generates 12 additional dollars in economic revenue. And Northlight has a proven model. They've been in business for 45 years. They have 6,000 subscribers. They have 50,000 audience members every year. And they have the data to back up their economic estimates. And they've provided economic estimates. For instance, they project that within their first 5 years of operations in Evanston, they will provide $55 million new dollars in spending, $427,000 in new city tax revenue.
Just one moment. If you're a part of, if anyone who's watching us on Zoom would put their audio on mute, thank you. Thank you. All right, go right ahead.
And last but not least, 115 new full-time equivalent jobs. We ask what proposals you have that beat those estimates. Northlight also has skin in the game. Their request represents approximately 10% of the estimated $20 million it will take for them to build this project. And they're requesting this money come from ARPA funds. As I read the ARPA guidelines that were put out, this request meets the ARPA criteria for economic recovery and, importantly, does not add any tax burden to Evanston residents. I have heard people ask, well, why would we provide money to Northlight if they're coming anyway? And here's what I ask. Why not help them? How would a denial of their request change their plans? If so, would a change in plans affect Evanston businesses in a negative way? What about the businesses in the First Ward and the Fourth Ward that are hanging on, hoping for economic revitalization? What about the Evanston residents hoping for construction jobs? So if we perhaps think it's okay for them to delay because we can't help them, we should also ask those constituents if it's okay for a delay. Yes, Northlight can be a catalyst for downtown, but they can't be a catalyst until they're here. I heard suggestions that the city embark upon a marketing campaign to attract new businesses to Evanston, which is a great idea. However, I see a little bit of irony that Northlight Theater is a business that wants to relocate to Evanston. So it would be ironic to me that if we spend money to attract a business and not help a business that's volunteering to come here. And finally, I think that Northlight represents the kind of economic development that ARPA is intended to support. Please bring them home to Evanston. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
Yeah, there's very little that I can add to that, except to say, going back to the purpose of ARPA, we have distinct purposes and a rare opportunity. Arguably, not enough has been allocated to this committee's jurisdiction, but that's a separate issue. I would simply suggest that in the Northlight proposal, you have enough detail about what the potential long-term impact is, continuing well beyond the first 5 years of operation, that you ought to approach this in setting your standards, that it can help you serve as a gold standard against which to measure other proposals. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next in-person speaker is Neil Gambro.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I'm Neil Gamble. I'm the chairman of the Mayor's Employer Advisory Council. I'm also in your ward. And, this is something that we've been working on for the last 3 years. And I'll say this, it does say Mayor's Employer Advisory Council. It's got its own life now because we've been at this for 3 years. We've done a lot with internships. The council itself has 134 members. And there are 50 employers, more people than 50 employers, but there are 50 employers that we've been working with for all 3 years. And these employers have been really working hard to figure out how to employ young people graduating from ETHS that may not be going to college. Or if they're going to go to college, it might be later, or might have a company pay for them. Let's talk about ARPA funds, though, for workforce development. One of the items I think that is really missing in the city is a workforce development element in the economic development field. Let's face it, we're never going to be the manufacturing hub of Chicago. But what are we going to be in the next 5 years? You've got incubators starting up. You certainly have new, smaller businesses starting up. They're all looking for help. Not only people help, but help in running their business. Workforce development embodies things like, what do you look like in 5 years? What kind of resources do you have in your city to help employers train their employees? We know that the workforce training and the job content anymore is changing like rapidly, and employers need that help. If you look around the city, we got the big ones, we know about the hospitals and we know about all the other ones, but there's hundreds of small businesses that really could be better, bigger, but I think the city needs to have something on its books in terms of workforce development, including a person actually in the government that really focuses on working with employers, figuring out what they want, what they need, and can they help. So I would propose at some point actually using some of these ARPA funds to fund a position that's going to be a workforce development expert and someone that can work with the employers, work with the organizations that train employees, and help employers stay here. And what happens when an employer wants to come here? What does he look for in the first place? Are the people here? can I get some people? You know they're here. Are they trained? I don't recommend the city train them. I think the city needs to know where the training can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to ask folks who are with us on Zoom who would like to speak. Paul, do we have a list of names at all?
I'm just aware from a colleague that there are people who have their hands raised that would like to speak, and I don't know who they are. Can we see a gallery view or no?
Yeah.
Okay, I see Ms. Gutierrez from Evanston Rebuilding Warehouse, and then Ms. Payton.
All right. You know what? I can't quite read the first one that you said.
That's Ina Gutierrez from the Evanston Rebuilding Warehouse.
Okay. Yes. All right. Okay.
Ina, do you want to go ahead?
Yes.
You have to unmute yourself, Ina. Sorry. Those are words
I'm sorry.
yeah,
I should be smarter than this by now.
I know.
Thank you so much
you.
to the committee for allowing my comment. I just had 3 things to offer as the executive director of the Evanston Rebuilding Warehouse. One is, I think this is incredibly exciting to see workforce development as a priority for the Economic Development Committee and use of the ARPA funds. I think that the labor market is rapidly changing, as Neil Gambo has said, and our task as a city and for some of your partners is to get ahead of it. And so I expect in the building trades in particular, a huge amount of demand in the union and non-union trades on infrastructure projects, replacing lead pipes. And we need to start that training now. We need to start it today. So when those jobs are open and available, we can place Evanston residents in them. The second thing I might offer, which is tied to that, is just the urgency behind this. It will take time to recruit and train. There's a very tight labor market right now, so we're asking residents to really give up a decent paying job now for an investment in their future. And so again, supporting organizations that are doing the training on the ground will be really important. And so I just would encourage a expedited process to move these objectives from the ARPA fund and really to strengthen our city. And the third thing I might offer, and I promise not to have coordinated with Neil in advance, we are proud members of the Mayor's Employers Advisory Council, is just to hone in on the expertise that the city already has and support those of us on the ground that are already doing the work. And so just to echo some of Neil's comments, employer connections, developer connections, things that the city are already doing to connect employers to participants. And then the city supporting those services of those who are training on the ground, I think will be critically important. So anyway, kudos on putting workforce development in ARPA. We're excited for that inclusion and are excited to work with the city as y'all figure this out. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we go back to gallery view, Ms. Payton, you're next.
Yep. Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm here to speak about the small minority landlords again. As you know, the moratorium here in Evanston is still in existence in Illinois until, I believe, the 19th. And this moratorium has hurt landlords, small landlords like myself, extremely hard during the pandemic. We still have to continue to pay our bills, regardless if we do not get paid from rent, and regardless if we have to wait for monies from the government. This will not only hurt us just now, this will hurt us in the future, because what the plan is to eliminate the landlord from seeing evictions or any type of credit that will allow us to know who might pay in the future. And will also hurt your affordable housing, because landlords like myself will be bought out by big landlords, which will turn into luxury housing. So your small landlord, who is mostly affordable homes will disappear. I'm asking again that you help the small landlord provide assistance in rehabbing affordable units and assisting in paying bills or anything that the landlord needs at this time. Also, I hope that you will not give ARPA money to the same people that have received grants many times before. I heard someone support the Northlight Theater, and you need to consider they're asking for $2 million, and they've already received $4 million in disaster money, which they spoke about at one of the meetings. And are you supporting people that are currently in Evanston or bringing people into Evanston? You need to support the businesses, which include small landlords, that has never been helped before, that you need to help the people here in Evanston stay alive with ARPA money, not bring in new people before you help your Evanston residents first. Thank you and have a good evening. Black Lives Matter.
Thank you, Ms. Payton. Is there anyone else on the Zoom call? I don't see any other hands. All right, so that concludes our public comment. Now, for tonight's agenda, our first item for consideration is the Evanston Economic Development Strategy for ARPA, and I'm going to call on Paul Salmsek to provide us with his presentation on this. I think what we should do is hear Paul's presentation and discuss the thoughts of our city staff on use of ARPA, and then I think open this to the floor of the committee to hear thoughts from the committee members as well. And then I think that some of the things that we're going to be discussing will loop into the items for discussion, which we have tonight as well. So let's move forward. Go ahead, Mr. Zelmzak.
All right, thank you, Committee Chair. I appreciate being before you in person tonight for the first time in a very long time. And if you can't hear me, please, whether it's on Zoom or here in the chambers, because of my mask, please let me know. I've always been a soft talker, but I think the amplification helps. So what I wanted to do tonight, and I've got the previous title slide from July 28th, but it's the same title, which is I just want to provide an update on where we left off from last time. We had a really good discussion, really went through a list, if you remember, a list of a lot of ideas that we learned from either from our experience or we learned from the community or learned from each other. And we went through that list, and some of us, including Mayor Biss and some of you, have had meetings with your constituents, and you're hearing things and you're providing feedback about direction and how we should be considering ARPA. And what I wanted to do tonight is kind of propose kind of my view of the information I've distilled and what I'm hearing and seeing, and want to see if you agree with that. And I have a few suggestions that I would like to ask for you to recommend to move on to the council. And then when I'm done with that, I'm hoping that you critique it, you criticize it, you hold me accountable, and you come up with, maybe there's other ideas you have that you want to bring to the table that we also should be working on. So I never take this podium thinking I have all the ideas. I'm just trying to help frame a conversation. So here are the emerging themes, and I'm going to kind of look at the screen because I don't have this memorized. But what we're hearing from the groups that we're talking to, downtown is a central gathering place. It's an economic engine for this community, and it needs to be fixed. It needs to be reinvented. I want to be sensitive how we say it because we have a really nice downtown. But there are some things we can do to fix it. And I would say that about all of our merchant districts, not just downtown. Secondly, quality of place is important. We heard a lot about placemaking in our last meeting, but we're also hearing this from the CEOs, we're hearing it from residents. People really want to see a change. They want to make Evanston a fun and a pretty and a clean place to be. Occasionally I forget to talk about art. Somebody at the First Ward meeting held by Councilmember Kelly under the moonlight recently said, don't forget about art. And I said, you know what, I haven't, but I don't talk about it enough, so we need to make sure that we bring it into our conversation. Clean, green, and safe. And again, we talked about this in our meeting last time, but I'm hearing this over and over, and I think we could do better. Mr. Gambo and Ms. Gutierrez talked about it. Careers are available, jobs are available, but we're finding that there are a lot of positions that are unfilled. And I'm not just talking about restaurant worker jobs. We learned recently that the North Shore University Health System has something in the range of 500 to 800 jobs available throughout the region right now. And these are high-paying, high-quality healthcare jobs. Really important that we continue to try to coordinate. For example, Councilmember Newsma asked me before this meeting, did I connect with Dave Stoneback to talk about the later thing that Councilmember Burns is bringing forward for a referral? I haven't. Why is that? Because we're in our silos. We got to continue to break those down. But we also have other organizations that we need to coordinate with, and we just need to continue to do that. And finally, COVID, mask, variant, distant, all of the things. You're muted. We're exhausted. And it's making us crabby, and it's making us not want to work together. So we just have to keep reminding ourselves that we're hopefully going to get through this, and we'll get back to business. So some work that we've done since the last meeting a few weeks ago, we met with the CEO group that it's formed a few months ago. And again, these are the CEOs of the larger organizations in town. They stressed in their meeting, and this is a theme it's happening in each of the 3 meetings we've had, we need cleanliness. Downtown needs to be safe, even if it's just a perception of safety. We need to work on it. We need to have better gateways into town when you're getting off the train and not have to walk through the dark, smelly tunnel under the Davis Street station, for example. The conversations about workforce development, this is one of my weakest points in my I guess tool belt, for lack of a better term. But we have good partners that are going to help us figure this out together. But we're hearing this more and more. There's the healthcare conversation I had. Ms. Gutierrez talked about a really good program that they're building for union trades. We have to work better and coordinate on that. So we're going to start that conversation a little bit more tonight. We're going to continue it a little more tonight, and then hopefully come up with a strategy. Retail strategy. This is something I've talked a lot about with First Ward Councilmember Kelly. She has a lot of retail in her ward. We really need to step it up and figure out what is the next wave. We learned last week that Urban Outfitters is closed. We knew that was happening. There is a plan to replace it, but it's a continuation, COVID or not. These big national retailers are slowly leaving the smaller kind of regional markets and going to the big power, those power centers or those regional malls. And then we had a meeting in downtown Evanston under the scaffolding during a rainstorm with Ward 4 and Ward 1 council members, with a lot of good ideas sharing from constituents about how do we do events and close streets and things like that. And then finally, how do we continue to do the kind of permanent or semi-permanent outdoor dining options? We still have a lot of COVID discomfort. People don't want to be inside, and it's kind of getting worse right now. So what I'd like to suggest is a series. And just hang with me for a few minutes while I talk about this, because I know we tend to always want to go right to consultants. But what I want to recommend is so we can, and I'll get to that point in a minute, but what I want to recommend is that that this committee this evening give the go-ahead for staff to take to City Council approval of a series of RFPs for consulting contracts for a citywide retail market study with a focus on some of the neighborhood business districts as well. I've talked with Councilmember Burns about particular strategy that we want to roll out at Church and Dodge and Emerson and Simpson, and we'll figure that out as we build the scope of services. The workforce development strategy, business district infrastructure, and then a placemaking strategy that Annie Coakley will talk about at the end of my presentation. And then this, and I skipped back to number 4, but this direct funding for businesses, which is what we talked about in the last meeting, where we come up with a scoring system and kind of let the private market ask for funding for emergencies and things, kind of like the construction grant that we talked about. So this is my feeble attempt to create a graphic that shows somebody holding a mirror up to us, and that is what that's what I think the value of the consultants is. They will show us what we may not see in our own selves because we're so used to seeing our faces on Zoom and the like. So, and one of my favorite community members who I hope is still on, I hope she's still on the Zoom, Ms. Payton, told me at the first ward meeting that we don't need a consultant, you need to consult us. And I think that's a really good point. Like, the community needs to be consulted. And I think if we use that as our framework for all of our consulting projects to make sure that we have a strong community engagement piece, then I think our community's voices will be heard throughout the process. And I have that on the bottom bullet. They're going to be mandated to include a really dynamic and an overused term, authentic engagement process. It's not going to be a process where we're sitting in a room and putting dots on maps. We really have to change the way we engage the community, and I think this is a really good opportunity. And people love to be engaged on economic development initiatives. So here I'm trying to make the case for why we need consultants. There's always a level of administrative cost in any kind of grant program you run. There has to be somebody who's managing it and running it. So there is an argument to be made that it's okay to spend a little bit of and the law itself says that you can pay consultants with the money to help you expedite delivery of the funds. There's just not enough staff to do the deep dive research that needs to be done. Can't do the community engagement, the cost estimation, and the sequencing. It's just too difficult. Big projects take time, and we have a limited amount of time to get these projects planned. We're also going to have to find other funding sources. ARPA is not going to solve all the problems. So if we have to find other grants, it might take a year or two. So let's get started and get this all planned out, and then hopefully by 2026, the law says if we have it all expended by then, we don't have to return any of it. So really briefly, retail market study. This is not intended to be comprehensive. I'm giving you an example, right? Councilmember Kelly has a really sharp retail expert constituent who gave us some feedback, said we have one of the best mixes of retail in the entire country for a community our size. Problem is it's spread out throughout the entire community. It's Central Street, Howard Street, Main Street, etc. So if all of those retailers, if you think about it, if you had a Mexican shop and just name a shop, if they were all on Sherman, we would have like the best strolling retail environment in the country, but it's not how it is. So how do we capitalize on this idea that we know that there's a real strong interest in having these independent retailers, and how do we do it, and how do we grow it? Don't just rely on the market. How do we incentivize things to happen? So I think these are like 7 things that I think we should be as a basis for any market study, and really trying to understand our market area characteristics, our demographics. There are reasons why some retailers aren't here. It's because there just isn't enough. There aren't enough rooftops. There aren't enough people in a small enough area to attract them. So I could do a market study. That would be all I would do for the city of Evanston for 3 months. That's probably not a good use of my time. So we could get a consultant who has a bunch of staff that could do it. Workforce development strategy. I put a bunch of question marks because I don't know how to do this. I've never done it. I'm learning, and I'm connecting with, I think, the right people, and I think we're on the right path. And I think one of the first steps I'm going to take, and I'm going to do that in the next few weeks, is sit down with all of our partners and ask them what they need. What do they need anything? And I think they do. And then work with possibly creating a strategy. I've been given some names that could be helpful in helping create that strategy. And that ultimately might lead to hiring a staff person or redeploying staff people to do this kind of work. I don't know yet, it's early in the phase, but I really think that in order for us to have an effective, proactive workforce development strategy that allows us to connect with North Shore University Health System and say, hey, we've got 10 people that we think are ready to be plugged into those healthcare jobs. We can't do that now. We do a little bit of that, especially on the youth side of things. And I also think that our community is small enough. The problem of unemployment in Evanston is typically around the range of 15 to 2,000 people. We can solve that. We can solve that. Again, this idea of direct business funding, this is an application process. We allow the private market to work a little bit and say, hey, we need some funding because of X, Y, Z, and then we'll consider that and run it through our scoring model. I've also discovered that there were a number of businesses that started up during the beginning of the pandemic and did not qualify for any of the programs because they had to show last year's revenues, and they didn't have any because they're new. So they started up, they opened, and then they were just left kind of high and dry without any customers because people are not patronizing their business. So I think there's a way to fill the gap there. That's a market failure that I think we could help with. I did include a slide on Northlight. They do have a request for $2 million. We have a lot of work to do to decide what level of support we want to recommend to the City Council. I'm presenting their ask. I'm not recommending that amount at this time. There's a lot of work to do to figure this out. But I will say they've made a pretty strong case. Even if you really think they're exaggerating their economic impact and you divided it in half, it's still a pretty significant impact. Gut check tells us it's going to be really nice to have an alternative activity in downtown Evanston that already has a very strong following. So I want to keep this as one of those ideas that we should really be considering funding directly from ARPA as kind of what I call direct business funding. And then let me see here. Business district infrastructure. I'm going to invite Annie to present in just 1 second unless there are questions from the committee before I introduce Annie. But here is, my thoughts are Evanston really reinvented itself in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and became kind of a cutting edge downtown, suburban downtown. And, a lot of people followed our lead and copied us and did the things that replicated it. So it's not that unique to have a really cool downtown area. I mean, we talked about this in our last meeting. I think a member Deacon talked about Naperville and a couple of other places she recently visited. And it's true. Like, people have kind of caught up. But we do have that advantage of having, like, the lakefront and the 30,000 people within a mile of church in Sherman. So we do have a special place that I think is uncomparable in the region. So we've got to capitalize on that. I think it's just a matter of whatever the opposite of complacency is, we have to get to that point. So, some of the examples of the infrastructure strategy that I'm talking about would be, are we going to set ourselves up to be able to do street closures on the weekend and have power, lined up on the street so people can plug in whatever the things are that they're going to, whatever's happening in those event spaces, that they can do that. Can you plug in a guitar amp? Can you plug in for lighting, whatever it is? Can we implement zero-way streets? Councilmember Newsma's coined term from the last meeting, where we close streets down and have it just be pedestrians. Or, do we revisit this two-way street idea where the one-way streets were designed to funnel people in and out of business districts? Let's slow the traffic down and get people looking at both sides of the street, and parking's a little easier that way too. We have 10 years ago, I think we started talking about wayfinding, and we still have the same signs we had when I started here 10 years ago. Lots to discuss about parking. Again, mobility system, outdoor dining, there's all kinds of infrastructure that we can work on. But Annie, I'd like to invite you, unless we want to pause to breathe for a second. Annie's going to present her placemaking strategy that would be like a continuance of this presentation. So I don't know if we want to wait to the end to ask, or do you want to ask questions now? And
What's the desire of the committee? Would you like to continue with the presentation?
okay.
Yes.
So
Okay,
Annie,
let's
if you
bring on-
want to share your screen and kick your strategy part off, and I'll yield the floor to you.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to start by saying I wouldn't call this a strategy. Paul asked me to put together some, inspiration from other communities that have done really well with placemaking initiatives. So this is by no means a strategy, but I'm here to sort of show you some things that could be implemented here in all of our areas of Evanston, not just the commercial districts, and especially not just downtown. And of course, my first suggestion is to hire a consultant to create and implement a public realm plan, not as commonly used or heard of in terms of urban planning, but a public realm plan would be, would touch on these bullets I have here. And really, it would be working with someone who would look at our assets, look at all the good things we do have, and just enhance them and make them a little bit better. And I have some examples in the next couple of slides. Also, my concern about the ARPA funding, is that it will go, and that we might not, if we could maybe create a placemaking fund, it would have a legacy. It could live on, if we could keep and continue to replenish it. Several other cities have placemaking funds that they collaborate and, they blend their funding from business improvement districts or SSA districts, which is what downtown Evanston, Central Street, and Main Dempster are. Other government funding, private foundation funding, and then they host events to fundraise for their funds. So I use this example, this picture, because it just is like kind of the most idyllic city street, right? It has outdoor eating, it has nice garbage cans, there's still good planters and public seating, and trees that are all in really great shape. But we do have an opportunity. Maybe I don't have a price tag for something like this, but what could our sidewalks look like? I often hear, probably daily, how great Wilmette is for their outdoor dining. And, that was not a reaction to the pandemic. That they hired Tuska, they made a plan to improve their sidewalks 4 years ago, and, and timing worked out for them because outdoor dining became way more popular and prioritized for many people. So great timing in their part. Why couldn't that happen here? Could we have wider sidewalks and easier sidewalks? A lot of the sidewalks, at least in downtown Evanston, have the brick pavers that are buckling, and they kind of have trip hazards. And there's some trip hazards on Central Street as well. So just one idea. I take so many pictures of garbage cans. I've taken all three of these pictures. So one thing that kind of really always gets me crazy is that we have these old recycle, containers that don't match our nice new cans. There are some newer ones that are for recycling, but why can't everything match? And then this trash can has that lid on top, and I'm assuming it's for wind, but that can is not full of garbage. I opened it. It was hardly full. People just don't want to put their hand down there. So that's what we're left with. And this is a common occurrence. I see this all the time. And then I just loved that I was on a trip with my husband in Three Oaks, Michigan, and I saw these garbage cans, and I took several pictures of them because I just thought they were so pretty. That's what I do on vacation, too. So years ago, I don't know how many years ago, Tuska also planned the streetscape for Sherman Plaza. So that photo is when it was initially created, and it had all those nice plantings in it. Today, it does not look like that. There is a great opportunity, I think, to refresh a lot of the landscaping. Downtown Evanston, as some of you may know, is responsible for a lot of these for all of these planter landscaping. So we're good here. We spend around $55,000 a year, maybe 60, on the plantings, the seasonal plantings in the raised flower beds, or the flower pots, some of the beds, and I'm working with Dave Stonebeck to figure out how, where we're missing opportunities. Our overall landscaping budget is $200,000, and $100,000 of that goes to garbage removal. And then 30 of it goes to an annual power wash, and the rest of it goes to flowers. Couldn't maybe that be reversed and we have more going to flowers? So we're working on it, but not just for downtown. Several other areas of Evanston, I think, could benefit from looking at the landscaping and buying, new greenery plants, things that are more sustainable. And this is also just sort of some current conditions, right? So this is the one on the left is like the storm. It was supposed to be stormwater, I think, and this is in front of the former Williams shoes. Every year I sort of ask them to freshen it up, and it just never lasts. I don't know what the solution is here. I'm not a plant or horticulturist by any means, but my response has always been that it's because of the salt and from pedestrian foot traffic. So. And then we have several other planters like this, and I'm working one by one, like an a la carte system to enhance those. But like I say, with the limited landscaping budget, we have to do it one at a time, and it would be just a nicer approach if like the whole city was looked at in terms of landscaping and those improvements. I heard a lot about public art and gateway projects. This is a picture I took in Columbus, Indiana. So are there possibilities for more gateway projects or great gateway art projects in intersections of Evanston communities to sort of highlight, you are in this community now. I often think of, and I live very close to the Puerto Rican flag arch in Humboldt Park, and it's got to be 25 years old, and still I see people taking pictures of it every day. You definitely know you're there or where you are with pieces of art like that. And then lighting is a big one. So this is a picture of Central Street that now that they have an SSA, they paid for twinkle lights or Christmas lights, pretty much Christmas lights, right, in each of these trees, and it's about $300 a tree. One of the things that kind of hits a couple of hiccups is if the tree at the base doesn't have electric, then they can't be lit. So maybe we look at all of the trees in commercial areas that could have a power source to them, so that a variety of different types of lighting could possibly happen. This is for Christmas, but then there are options that are year-round. So uplighting on trees is about $300 a tree. I received a quote from a local lighting company. But uplighting doesn't work in every area because you don't want to be shining lights in people's apartment windows. So moonlighting is from lighting from the tree down. But lighting, I think, would be a huge, significant improvement for a lot of areas of Evanston, and you can use these trees as a great example. And then there's interactive lighting. I have a video, if I have time, I'll share it, but this is a company out of California, and they have this interactive lighting, several of them. So this is a singing tree, and if you sing or clap your hands or play music to it, it changes and kind of has like, it's interactive. And then there's an interactive canopy that can go in certain places. And when you walk under it, it changes and has really cool display. And then there's a group out of New York called the Urban Conga, and they specialize in placemaking materials. And a lot of it is around the idea of play. So they have a whole host of things. I just am sharing a few of them. So this is a musical bench. It's not very loud, but it's soft, but it can be heard. And it's just a playful interaction. This could be between $15,000 and $18,000 for one of these that could travel from neighborhood to neighborhood. Similarly, this product could also travel. This is downtown Evanston has a ping pong table, but at an event, a woman got very excited and basically threw herself on it, and we haven't pulled it out since then. But this is a little more sturdy. I think we could, invest in something like this and definitely put them in other parts of the city, not just downtown. And then they also make these play cylinders. These are pretty pricey, but $25,000 for 5 of these, and it's also an interactive musical like drum. And then there are these as well. These are similarly hand drums. And then there's a group called Better Block, and they are based in Texas, I believe. They basically send you kit in the mail. Get your business outside was kind of one of the things that I was working on, or a thought I had for maybe a different grant program, but everything is outside now. So, people are really enjoying and spending more time outside, more than we ever have. And this is a movie setup, so they provide you with the lights and the tables. I mean, this wouldn't have to be purchased from this group. That all could be locally sourced. It's just an idea. And then market kiosk. So, maybe, again, get your business outside kind of as an idea, not just for Street Fest, but maybe more often and maybe around holidays. But like if the city owned this infrastructure and it was used at different Street Fests and everything looked the same, maybe they could be built at the Rebuilding Exchange. Again, just some ideas. Shipping containers as retail. I can't remember what city this is, but they own all of the infrastructure and then they rent it to startups and entrepreneurs for like $250 a month. This is Battle Creek, Michigan. They created these chalets, kind of like a she shed. They're about like $6,000 each, and they put them on on a lot that they owned. And again, retailers get like 6 months of an opportunity to be in here and pop-ups or home-based businesses. And then, of course, art. So a live art festival might cost around $200,000. The thing that would be great about this is it would be a huge tourism boon. We could, definitely work with the Convention and Visitor Bureau to promote it all over the Midwest. Think Art Prize, but maybe a little smaller. And you're left with permanent art afterwards. So it's like pretty great investment. Uptown just did something very similar. And the great part of what they did was that they kind of did all of the art in one area to create like a vibe, but then the art was moved to different parts of the Uptown community because they use these boards and then they install them to buildings. And then just some like tactical urbanism, right, which is like a very low cost option for usually temporary, for placemaking things. So this is just, some fiber cord with some lighting to illuminate alleys. It could be across streets, the opportunities for where they could be, all over the city, depends, right? And then also smaller little tactical urbanism things that are very, affordable. So actually this picture of the sewer on the bottom middle is in Evanston. This sort of guerrilla, right? This guy just came out and did it. Nobody paid him. But we could hire artists to paint on all of our assets. Downtown Evanston years ago worked with the local One River Art School to paint all of our electric boxes. We could do that again. We could do that all over the city, just lots of color and art. There's a local guy in Chicago, Jim Basher. He fills in potholes with these tiles. And then this guy, he does a lot of these things on the sewer caps. But also just like some paint goes a long way. The Joy on Central installation, the striping of the sidewalks, that was about $4,000 total. And people loved it, and they still talk about it, and they're still out there. So just hiring the right people to help with that. And this is in Detroit, and now it looks enormous, and I know that we don't probably have a city lot this large, but they took over a city lot and paved it and then painted it and turned it into a roller rink, which I think is just really cool. And then not placemaking, but a suggestion is that perhaps Evanston could use a new brand and work with a branding team, not only to create a brand and a tagline and tell the story, but also purchase, a whole campaign of marketing. So, recently Berwyn did this, and they have billboards, they have commercials, they have radio ads, they have tons of advertising supporting all of their very tongue-in-cheek kind of storytelling, but then got a new logo. It's a lot more than just a logo. It's, it's a whole, the story and the approach of how we want to present Evanston as positively as it is. It's a great city, but maybe a brand could help. That's really it. So like I say, it was not a strategy. Paul asked me to present some inspiration, and that's what I think I did. So if we were looking for a strategy, I can come back with something more concrete, maybe at the next meeting, but that's it for now.
Thank you very much, Annie. Lots of interesting ideas. Okay, Paul.
That's it.
That concludes your presentation?
That concludes our presentation for next steps. So again, just a reminder, what we're trying to do, and Annie's correct, I mean, what the point of her presentation was, you know, there are consultants that could help with a Evanston focused or an Evanston aesthetic placemaking kind of process, and to go along with the other consultants I had mentioned earlier. So thank you.
All right. Committee? Share your thoughts.
Thanks. Actually, it might be helpful if we could go to the presentation where you list kind of the 5 points and where you were suggesting a consultant and where you, we have that?
Yeah.
Just
Me
to
or
help-
Paul? I'm sorry.
No, Paul.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yes, that slide, just to organize the
Right.
the conversation a little bit. I'm going to kind of go down the list and just kind of respond. You know, I think the retail market study is probably one of the more useful things at this point as an early step. COVID is, retail was changing anyway, and and our business districts were changing to begin with. But I think that looking at the business districts, in light of COVID, is probably a pretty useful piece of information. With respect to the workforce development strategy, I think that what maybe rather than trying to hire a consultant, I think that really meeting with the Mayor's Employment Advisory Council members. There are a lot of organizations that are doing job training now. Youth Job Center comes to mind, but also our Oakton Community College, I presume. I'm not quite sure who the major workforce training agency is for North Suburban Cook, but they have contracts with the state and federal government and lots of resources. So I think that probably rather than a consultant, I think that the staff person or somebody dedicated to really work with those organizations and identify the employment, gaps and really who needs training, because it's all well and good to have employment training, but if we're providing employment training for 500 people out of a workforce in Evanston of like 38,000, I mean, that's, it's a question of, is that where we want to put our resources to generate, the money? And again, and then the business district infrastructure, again, at some point you'll need a consultant to really kind of flesh out streetscape recommendations, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily the first step, because I think it's really important for us as a city to understand what the market is, the direction. So that may be, I think I would probably put that a little further down in the to-do list. Direct funding for business, obviously, I think that there are identified needs. We've had, at prior meetings, we've had other groups come with ideas for either entrepreneurship training or, the North Light proposal. And then, again, the placemaking strategy, you almost need to do that before you do the infrastructure. Mm-hmm. I mean, or they maybe want part and parcel of the same thing. So I think that one of the things that we really need to do is prioritize which which of these ideas, should kind of happen first, or what's going to get us to the best place. And I think that probably it's the market study, and I think the workforce development strategy is real important, because I just kind of looked at some of the information that's available from the state and kind of just where our tax base is. And, in Evanston, our property tax base, 77% of it is residential property. And, the retail is a pretty small, it's like 21%. And, industrial, which has got, good paying jobs, is almost nothing. So
tiny.
I think that we really ought to look at what information is available, and so we understand that as we're making decisions. So that's my
Thank you.
comment.
Yeah, that's helpful. Okay, Ms. Deacon, should we just go down the list like this? Why not? Yes.
So I'll jump in. I appreciate all of this thinking, Paul, sort of synthesizing everything that we discussed at our last meeting. And Annie, thank you for all those ideas. I feel like there's a balance that we need to have between the longer-term planning efforts and shorter-term wins. I think it's going to be, in my opinion, a hard sell to go out to the community when our downtown is struggling and say, we are hiring consultants for all of these things and we'll be back to you in 6 to 8 months. I think that we as a body and as a city council, whomever those decision makers are, in my opinion, there are key catalytic opportunities, and I keep going back to those catalytic opportunities that we can move forward and then sort of fill in around those with some of these items. I don't disagree that we're going to need, outside consultants to advise us on some of these things, but it's about building momentum. And I would have a hard time saying, we're going to study these things for 6 to 8 months when, in my opinion, there are some things that are clear catalytic opportunities that we need to move on now because our downtown can't wait for everything to happen then. I would also say that, to your point,
Lisa, could you give us some good examples of that, or what? I know you talked about them at the last meeting, but
in my opinion, one of them is moving the farmers market from where it is currently to the downtown area, that central area, so that it can be used to activate and leverage other opportunities in the downtown. Understanding where we're at with the movie theater, I think the Northlight Theater is a great example of a catalytic opportunity. I would add to that, Northwestern had a great announcement last week, and is it $50 or $75 million, Paul, that's going into that Maple Avenue Lab Street building? It's like, how do we as a community sort of capture some of the activity that's happening in there and support it and see how the business districts around it can feed from that? So those are examples, I would say, of catalytic opportunities. And then to your point, Paul, about coordinating with Public Works and getting out of our silos, I don't see a built environment right now that is sort of, I don't want to call it taking risks, but even our outdoor dining areas, we have those big cement blocks around them. You go downtown in Chicago, you go to these other areas where they have these outdoor dining areas, even when they're on the street, they don't have these huge cement blocks around them that just say, don't stay here, so we need to be creative, not just in our approach to economic development, but in our approach to the built environment. And that does, in my opinion, involve breaking down some of those silos and making sure that Public Works and whomever else that we need to work with is on board. Mm-hmm. So those are a few off the top thoughts.
good, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Newsma?
We're going down the row.
Yeah, sure.
I will echo the lack of enthusiasm if all we're doing out of the gate is hiring consultants. As essential, I think, as that is in the long run, to allow us to take a strategic approach to spending this windfall. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but how boring is that? And how lame is it if I go to a ward meeting and, hey, how are we spending that ARPA money? Well, we've got 3 or 4 consultants on the hook. And let's also keep in mind that these aren't the only consultants that we're going to need to be hiring. We're talking about a strategic plan that's going to require a consultant. We're talking about consultants for environmental justice, for CARP implementation. So we're going to be lousy with consultants for a long time, and that's probably a good way to spend our tax money, rather than hiring permanent staff to fulfill a short-term kind of strategic analysis need for a specific defined objective. It makes sense to hire a consultant. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I like the idea of focusing on something that we can point to that will still be there in 15 to 20 years, and we can look back on and say, that's what ARPA money did. That was the catalytic opportunity for our community, and consultants had a role to play in that, but that's not, no one's going to get excited about consultants as necessary as they are. So I will put in, a strong a statement of support for Northlight, at whatever the number, comes out to be. Even at $2 million, I think that is very justifiable from an economic investment perspective. And I'm not sure what your plan is for the rest of this discussion, Paul, but I do hope at some point we will talk about the criteria by which we will be making decisions. And certainly one of those will be return on investment, and, heads and tails above anything that we've seen. Northlight can demonstrate a very strong return on investment from the perspective of the city of Evanston. Whatever money we put into them, we're going to get back, multifold. So I reserve the right to jump in
Of
later,
course,
but that's what I
yes.
have for now.
No, this is all good. This is what, we need this type of discussion. I echo Member Lindwald's recommendation for a retail study. Retail was going off a cliff before COVID came, but we have had some parts of our city, our retail environments, that did thrive because they were what I describe as they defied the internet. And then, kind of the awful part of COVID was that it drove them back, because if they didn't have a strong internet presence, then they were struggling. But I think the businesses that we see on the main Dempster Mile that were doing well before COVID are the things that you can't buy on the internet. And that's the shopping experience that people are looking for, that the big chains, they're all on the internet. So I do think there was something there that we were seeing develop, but certainly I think having a retail study for what do we do with our downtown and understanding these trends, because shopping has changed completely. It was changing before, and then COVID changed it even more. So I think we should understand what's the retail market going to be, because then what do we do to attract businesses that people will want to come visit, especially in our downtown and in our other business districts. So I would support that quite a bit. Workforce development is something that the council has been talking about for years, and we haven't put enough resources into it. Years ago, I went to a National League of Cities conference, and the most interesting workshop I went to was about Louisville, where they decided they would have 15,000 degrees by the year 2015 or so. And they essentially did what this group is talking about, but they did it in an organized way. They realized their major businesses were going to leave because they didn't have the workforce that they needed. So they figured out what's the workforce of the future for Louisville, and then they helped coordinate, because Louisville is very rich with lots of educational opportunities, and they did it. They actually achieved their goal, and it actually survived through a number of different changes of government. So that is truly something that we have been looking at and nibbling at the edges on in Evanston, and it's an essential need in our community. I think instead of a consultant, I like the idea of a dedicated staff member, because you need someone who's got the through line, who's there for all of the meetings. If it isn't a full-time employee, then a part-time employee, or perhaps someone who, one of our ICMA interns, who we get to work on that, because I think that's really critically important. We have our 2 hospitals, we have the university, we do have our students coming out of Evanston, and we have the opportunity with Oakton to do a lot of coordination, but we need a coordinator. So I think that is something that really we've got to maintain that, and that's an investment in our future in terms of drawing and keeping employers here and keeping Evanstonians in their own community. With respect to the business districts and the placemaking study, I agree that those are critically important, and it does make a big difference in terms of what is the experience going to be. But I agree that those might be somewhat lower down in terms of where we go, in terms of prioritizing. I do think doing a retail study, it may not be exciting, but we have to have something, a good plan, in order to invest these dollars. You're right, Paul. Right now, people are being kind of taken aback by the Delta variant. We had all hoped that we wouldn't be where we are now. So I think we do have to think of catalytic starters for the community as we head into the fall, which is not that easy. But I also do support the direct funding for businesses. I think that we need to get some of that money into the hands of businesses that need it right now. But I also want to just keep at the top of mind that this ARPA money is really an investment in our future. And so however we invest it, we have to think on the long range in terms of what's the return on this investment for 10 years, 20 years. I actually was on the council when we voted in the movie theaters. And that transformed our downtown for the last 2 decades. So, that's that was a 20-year investment, and without COVID, that would still be repaying. So I think those are the things that we have to do, is look, what does this bring back to Evanston, not in 5 years, but in 5, 10, 15 years. And not every dollar will be able to do that, but we won't get this money again. So that's my view on that. I agree with Councilmember Newsma and about Northlight. Having sat here and made that decision and voted for the movie theaters and watched what happened by bringing that number of people in downtown, it worked. So they have been taking people out of Evanston for years, and they have sustained themselves elsewhere, but they still think of Evanston as their home. So I do think that's really important. Now, even if we gave them that money, they still have, that's down the road. So that's not an instant change. So there are some things that I hope we can figure out, but I think we're going to have to say to people, this is an investment, and investments take a little bit of time to pay off, but we want to be smart about how we spend this money. If we could change our two one-way streets back to two-way streets, I've been a supporter of that forever. Now we might actually have the money to do that and change that. Our traffic engineer used to just roll his eyes when I would propose that to him. So those are my thoughts so far. But thank you for all of this work also. This is really giving us a lot to chew on and a lot to move forward on. Councilmember Burns?
Yes, so in full support of the retail market study, and obviously with a focus on the sub areas, which includes, as Paul said, Simpson, Emerson, and in the Church and Dodge area. My concern is, even before COVID, in the Fifth Ward, the business districts have suffered from a lack of foot traffic, and the restaurants and businesses are struggling to stay afloat. I think obviously the delivery services and the catering and all that has helped folks hold on, and also some of them have converted to charitable activity where they're providing, food and other services to the community as a part of their charity efforts, but that's certainly not a model for sustainability. And we just have to do better, in the Fifth Ward and in those particular business tracks to try to attract people in and draw people in. And I do think we're at the point where we need some help, some folks who know how to really target areas for economic development and recovery, and we need to bring them in to help us with this. So in complete support of number one. Number two, workforce development strategy. I do think we need to determine both for workforce development, but also I would say this applies to our CARP implementation goals, the staff that we need to really drive those two things forward. We need to move beyond the planning and the talking and understand that if we're gonna succeed in these areas, somebody has to drive the work. It won't do it by itself. And I don't think that's something that a committee could tackle on its own, only meeting, once or twice, every couple months. I think it's vitally important that we gain traction with workforce development. So I would support looking into, full-time, part-time staff to help us with that work. I also agree that there are some moves that we can make right now towards workforce development. I'm focused on, I'm working with, Sharon Johnson, our workforce compliance person at the city, and Director Stoneback and others throughout the city to figure out how we create a lead pipe replacement workforce program. And my main concern is that I want to see us, the city, take leadership in training people or figuring out who's going to do the training. To me, that really is what it comes down to. Let's not shop this out. If we can do it ourselves, if we can possibly create some quasi-government organization that we can work with to do the training that could go out and fundraise but also bid on contracts. I don't know what we need to do, but we have to figure out how to get people trained and how to drive that work ourselves as a city and not shop it out and expect someone else to do it. We really need to lead on that. And then the business or direct funding for businesses. I mean, I think we're ready to move on that if we've determined that we'd like to do some direct funding to businesses. I think we could determine what amount we'd like to allocate towards that purpose and allow them to apply whenever we're ready and, review it and then make those allocations. We might be ready to do that. Placemaking also, I actually offered to make a while ago referral for a placemaking committee. I noticed that the city used to have a public arts committee, and it strikes me that we might be able to get some volunteer help around placemaking. So if there's some general interest in that, I don't mind making the referral. And that might be a step we can take before we hire a consultant. Thank you.
Scott?
So I was wondering, Paul, in terms of the market study, I guess I'm wondering what would be the main result of that? I'm kind of curious. Like, what are some outcomes?
Oh, so the question was, what would the outcomes
Well,
be
just
if we hired?
hypothetically, 8 months down the line, then what? What does it tell us? What are some
Sure.
things?
Yeah. So what it would tell staff and how we would react to the report is, these are the types of retailers that are active in the marketplace that will fit into the demographics and socioeconomics and the spending potential in your community, and where we should focus that placement and that attraction. I play around with this once in a while. We go and do the work. Like we've found a store in Ravenswood that is close to signing a lease. Like, drove down there, talked to them, invited them up here, walked them around. But again, I've probably put 20 hours into that, and I work 40 hours a week. There's only so much right? So that's one idea. There's a number of ideas like that we've done over time, but that's just a gut feel. There's no strategy behind that. It just, you just use your kind of common sense as a resident of the community. But the the strategy would tell us how much of each of the retail types we would need, where does it go. It might even say, don't do any retail in these certain corridors or on these certain side streets, like focus your efforts here. And what ends up happening is it's not Zalmazak, coming here and droning on like I do sometimes. It's a fresh approach, a fresh look at it. And, and like Ms. Payton said, I took that to heart when she mentioned, like, hey, just consult us. We know what we want here. Well, I want a consultant to listen, but I also want a consultant to say, you might want a Gucci store at Church and Dodge, I'm just making that up, or you might want Barnes & Noble to come back.
Yeah.
But that's just not happening because of the way the market works. So we can rule those things out and focus on the things that could really work. And my sense is that it's going to be a lot of focus on trying to develop small retail, independent retail. There's a lot of creative and smart people here in this community that would do that if they had the capacity, the capital to do it. I think we'll learn more about that. But again, this idea of like, where does it go? How much of it? That's the kind of thing, like, it would just be really helpful to have that kind of advice.
Okay, yeah, I guess I am somewhat skeptical. I do feel like there's a likelihood it just comes back and it tells you what you
I
already know.
Right.
And you could just say that, and you don't need that cover, but, so I would be in agreement of not. And
Yeah.
what is the sort of dollar figure on that, roughly?
It just depends. For a community-wide retail kind of analysis, I don't even want to estimate, maybe $100,000. Okay, I don't know.
We actually have someone here who can tell us. Ms. Lindwall.
I can't tell you for sure, but I think that the kind of retail market study you need, which is really an assessment of, are these business districts working, where are the gaps, talking, the consultant would talk to landlords, they would talk to businesses, and, it shouldn't be that expensive. I mean, it's citywide, but I would think somewhere more in the 50 to 75,000, and maybe, it depends on how involved you want the market consultant to get. The one thing I would not do is, in the olden days, they used to have a kind of what's called like a retail gap analysis, where you look at, all the different categories of state sales tax you can get, and you say, well, your dollars, people are going out of the community to buy these goods, and I don't think that's the kind of study we need. So I think you have to be very careful in what you're asking for. But you're really looking for a market assessment of, how are our business districts working? What are the strengths? What are the issues that landlords are having in leasing their spaces? And in part, I'm sure that we will find out that in part it's because the spaces are old and obsolete and they don't have the proper electrical. And so, we need to know that, because that can then inform where you might want to invest direct business dollars, for example.
And it also helps with landlords to say, you're not going to rent unless you do this. And we have a consultant who has looked at other similar small cities.
Landlords
like
aren't going to know that, or?
No, a lot of them don't. I mean, they'll just hang out. We've had landlords who've kept the space on the Starbucks on Sherman, that was empty for 15 years. It was an out-of-town landlord who until Annie Coakley's predecessor actually contacted her and said, let me tell you what you can do with your building.
Right. She spent a year doing that.
She
It
did.
took a
She
really
spent a
long
whole
time,
year
so.
doing it, and now that Starbucks is going gangbusters. But it was empty for 15 years, and I can't tell you how many people came to this podium and said, why aren't you doing anything? Because there are a remarkable number of landlords who own enough property that they just shrug it off. Howard Street is a really good example of that.
Okay, thanks. Then the other one, I got to admit, if the Northlight Theater thing seems so awesome, but I am sympathetic to the idea if it's already happening, giving money doesn't seem like it would be needed. I see the fairness argument if sort of these incentive dollars are going to go to other places But if we know it's happening, I would be skeptical of simply handing over any amount of money. Though I would think that would be an example for me how I would see spending this is like, ask Northlight of all the cool things you could do in the area immediately around it, how would you like to see that change, and let Northlight direct, determine how the sidewalk should look and whatnot, whether there should be public art but the city around it, the infrastructure around it, that would seem like a good idea to me. But directly giving money if they're already coming, I guess I am skeptical of. And the last thing, I don't know the details about lead pipe removal, but I would 100% support anything around that. I've actually sat in on several academic talks looking at the effects of lead, and it is, with 2 small children, it is shocking. After tobacco, it really is one of the biggest toxins of the last century, I have no doubt. So I would support any aspect, and I can imagine there's many ways to support more lead removal. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm also supportive. I concur with Member Lindwall in supporting could you go back to the, thanks, the list of, the first, of having a consultant for the market, for the downtown. I think it's just incredibly complicated how to attract and bring in and know what our, well, maybe not knowing as much as getting, working with landlords and retailers and having the context and be able to reach out and figure out how we actually get a few attractive anchor stores. And I think once we hit 2 or 3, it has sort of a synergistic effect. And so I think it's really important that we're able to do that. We've seen too many really popular locales closed now in Evanston. So we do need to do something drastic to get that jump started. So I think that is really important. I would like to, we don't need to be told though, I think there's a lot of key elements that we're already aware of. We know that Evanston's really expensive, and I don't want to see us, spending a lot of money on somebody to come back and tell us it's too expensive. I think we need to work on that. We know that. So those components we can start working on now. And I think there's others as well. But I do support that. I think it's, again, very complicated, and we need somebody who can really help us do that, the sort of outreach we need right now. So I do support that. And again, I'd like to see, are these slides available, Paul? Do we have this presentation?
I did not upload that to I will afterward. But
okay, great. That would be great.
Is that?
Yeah, thank you. That would be great. And I'd like to see, in terms of like such an RFP, just see a really tight RFP on that.
Yeah.
And then with regard to workforce, I'm very supportive to Member Wynn's comment about maybe on staff, but I would also like to see a pretty good, a cost-benefit analysis of who we do have on staff now, and in terms of our priorities, and are we right now dedicating hours and time to, the way that we want to be directing them in terms of perhaps we have some staff now that could be dedicating time towards workforce development. So I would just want to be sure that that we can't, that we're prioritizing currently the way all of our staff is being used in any related area. And with regard to Northlight, I'm very excited about Northlight, though I also agree with Scott. I think that the $2 million I think is okay, but I think we should have a tangible return. I don't think, of course we're going to have a lot of residual, foot traffic, and that's great, but I think that we as a city need to ask for something tangible, whether it's a certain percentage of local hiring for that, but something. I think something tangible, not just the wonderful effects of the existence of Northlight, but something concrete that is offered. And I would recommend something along the lines of employment, local hiring. And for placemaking, and all that, I'd like to really ask staff that we lead, that we start to direct, ask for innovative, creative thinking from our staff, and look at the many cities across the nation that are doing so many wonderful, taking so many wonderful measures to make their downtowns alive, and really encourage, that sort of innovative leadership. Yeah, so at this moment, I don't feel strongly about a consultant for placemaking. I think we can do this. And I just want to mention, we did have this amazing meeting downtown in torrential downpour with a bunch of First Ward residents and Alderman Newsma and Scott and Annie, just who are so enthusiastic, so many residents that are so enthusiastic about collaborating, who want to reach out and want to help schedule events in Fountain Square. We met to see about blocking off streets to create streetscapes and pedestrian streets and having weekly events on Saturday, and so many, everybody wants to roll up their sleeves and help out. So we have an amazing city with residents who are prepared to commit and work towards making placemaking happen. So I hope to collaborate with you more and try and get this figured out so we can get Fountain Square off the ground and look at creating a pedestrian area there on Saturdays, at least, Saturdays maybe from noon until midnight, and plan events every Saturday, maybe once a month in the winter, but every Saturday during all of the warm, 8 out of 12 months.
I have Councilmember Newsma.
But we have, I think, just a couple
Councilmember Reed?
I think Reed was.
Yes. Yes, I'm here. Thank you for calling on me. I will express, particularly the last two, Claire, and if the gentleman's name is Scott, I want to echo particularly their statements. I'll start with Northlight. I also think Northlight will be a great addition to our city. I'm not confident that giving $2 million to Northlight will be a great bang for our taxpayers' buck. I mean, Northlight, they were planning on coming to Evanston before the pandemic. I presume that they were going to be able to make the financing work if there wasn't a COVID-19 pandemic, and so I'm hoping that they can still do that without city funding. I mean, we've spent already over 10% of the COVID money thus far, and another $2 million would be a sizable amount, particularly if we just look at the money that we have available for this, the $20 million we have available for this year. But I am fully supportive, and to that same note, I'm not super supportive of giving money to individual businesses. I think supporting, our low-income residents makes a bit of sense, but I think when it comes to individual businesses, I think the best use of our funds would be to support, projects that have a citywide impact. To the similar note that, again, forgive me if Scott is not the name, that Commissioner Scott mentioned, which is that instead of giving Northlight $2 million, having them have a large say in how funds would be spent in the area to create an atmosphere that would be both beneficial directly for Northlight, but for downtown as a whole. And so I'm really supportive of using funds to support placemaking, to create an environment in the city that will pay dividends for economic development, regardless of which individual business is there for years to come. Yes, I'll end there. And I do think the idea of consultants is not a horrible one. It may not be exciting or fun or all of those things, but certainly we need the right people to, if we don't have the capacity now on staff, which I know Paul is kind of in a silo by himself, particularly with some recent departures of folks and a new life coming into the world. Paul is kind of a one-man band playing every instrument by himself, which I'm sure is tiring. And so I think the idea of consultants in the short term would make sense to allow us to really properly assess the information. And one question I did have is, again, I'm learning folks' names, but one of the commissioners mentioned that we would not want to do conduct a study on sales tax dollars that are leaving the city. And I I actually think differently, and so I'm actually curious if that commissioner can expound on why they don't think that's a good idea. My thought is that if folks are, just like we were saying, folks are leaving for Northlight and taking their dollars elsewhere, folks are leaving for other expenses that they can't, get here, whether, as Paul kind of jokingly said, whether it's to go to the Gucci store or anywhere else. I think it's worth figuring out, what are those key things that people are leaving for, and figuring out if we can bring those to our business districts to keep more money locally. So I was just curious why you thought that wasn't a good use of the consultant's time and our tax dollars.
Okay, that was, Councilmember Reed, that was committee member Jean Lindwald.
Yes.
The reason I say that is that, typically the result would be, for example, if you did the analysis, I'd say, book sales are leaving the town because we don't have Barnes and Noble anymore. We're not likely to get a so the result is you're still not likely to get a Barnes and Noble back, or we're not likely to get a department store to set up shop in Evanston. So while you might find that people are shopping for books and I guess actually now shoes in many cases in other communities, our ability to attract that particular kind of business may be limited. So it's it's information that I'm just by way of explanation, I'm a city planner, and I've worked as a planning consultant for 30 plus years, and have worked with various market consultants who that's the kind of information that was produced, and it's not very helpful from a planning perspective when you're trying to engage the community and figure out what are the real opportunities to be unique and create special places. So that was the reason for my comments.
Thank you.
Councilmember Reed, did you have anything else?
No, that'll. And I want to apologize. I was late. I scheduled a ward meeting at the same time as our committee meeting. I wasn't aware that I made that scheduling conflict, but thank you.
Okay. Now will Councilmember Newsma?
Councilmember Braithwaite may have had a question.
Oh, excuse me, yes.
I'm not sure who's.
Councilmember Braithwaite, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
Yes, which, I'm sorry, I lost track of everybody. Would you like to weigh in?
No worries. I think so many of the comments that were previously said, I don't think I have anything else to add, but definitely a good discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councilmember Newsma.
I'll keep this short since we have other things to talk about. And Paul, I'll follow up with you with some more detailed feedback. But just 3 quick points on workforce development. I just want to acknowledge that Evanston is not an economic island. We exist in a regional economy, and let's keep that in mind as we're talking about resource development. Jobs we create here, or workers we train here, likely won't stay here. Also, if we're talking about workforce development, I don't know what I don't know, not my area of expertise. I do know that the schools have to be part of that discussion, yeah. District 65, UTHS, and Oakton. And it's not just a city thing. I think I might even argue that the schools maybe even play more of a role, particularly Oakton, when it comes to workforce development. Number 2, downtown, super important, and I like the idea of hiring a consultant to kind of guide us through reimagining downtown. And whether or not Northlight gets the whole package they're asking for, we need to spend an equal amount of money, if not more, making downtown a welcoming environment for everybody who's going to be coming in to see a movie and to see a show and go to a restaurant and go to the farmer's market and everything else. Having said that, downtown is important. It's not just about downtown. We've got other business districts in the 4th Ward, other neighborhoods in Evanston, so let's not get too focused on downtown at the expense of other areas in the city that need attention. And last but not least, I'm glad that arts made your list, Paul. And let's put arts and entertainment together. I'm sure that's what you intended. But just to be explicit, developing Evanston as a destination for arts and entertainment with a movie theater, with Northlight, and with everything else we can bring to bear in that regard, I think that fits in really well with a rebranding initiative. And that was something I think that Andy mentioned. So that would be something that I would support, is a branding initiative with regional outreach.
And I think, I'm just going to jump in on that, Jonathan. I think that's something that we can also bring Northwestern in on, because there is so much cultural art there that if we can brand ourselves along with all of the concerts and plays and the Block Museum that at Northwestern, that would be important to say, arts are alive and well here in Evanston, and here's how we want you to think about that. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Can I think we have a follow-up, Lisa?
I just had a question for you, Paul. We've been talking a lot this evening about sort of longer-term strategy, but to my point of momentum, is there anything that you can share on your discussions, about the movie theater or some of these other vacant spaces? So when we are trying to have conversations or to, show to the community that there is momentum, that there are things happening, anything that you can share there that won't impede, private discussions?
Sure, I appreciate that opportunity. That's always been the fun part about the job, and what's always energized me, and has kept me in place for as long as this is a dynamic community. We're now at 78,000. When I started, we were at 74. I take personal, responsibility, or I'll pat myself on the back for bringing 4,000 new people here. But in all seriousness, this is an exciting place. Lots, and there's still a ton of things that we have left to do, and I could spend my whole career here, and we will not have accomplished all of them. To get to the exact question, yes, I mean the movie theater development, or Church Street Plaza, is under contract. If you remember, in November of 2013, the current owner paid $70 million for that property. $70 million. By the way, that property is the movie theater. It used to be Buffalo Wild Wings. There's a Urban Outfitters that's now closed. Across the street on the first floor, American Apparel. I learned when I first started that Corner Bakery, the chain, was there as well. Wolfgang Puck. So, and then across the street where Furious Spoon was, and it was Borders. Now it's Northwestern Medicine on the upper floor. That's all part of the same development. So this development is under contract. I'm hoping the new owner closes on it by the end of September. So that's one update. They are, I would have to assume it's the current owner that's negotiating a lease with a movie theater operator. I can't imagine that the new owner is involved in it, but they might be. I have no idea. But they are close to terms. It'll look different and feel different when it's open, but there has always been interest in that movie theater. That movie theater, Century, the operator, Cinemark, was struggling with the current owner for years, and they used COVID to get out of their lease. They took them to court as an act of God, or as an act of government, actually, when Pritzker announced the public emergency and said you can't go inside. Cinemark said, our lease says that we can get out of our lease if the government restrains us from doing business, and we believe that this is one of those cases. So it's not a symptom of Evanston having problems. This is a private market deal. The lease was too expensive. $70 million basis on the shopping center means the rents are sky high. You never see an independent retailer in that space. So I'm praying and hoping that the new owner gets it at a much lower basis. And what I've heard, just generally speaking, is that they've already got a new program in place. They've got letters of intent. So they're going to reprogram that facility if they can close the deal. And that's, let's give it another 30 days. And that'll be important. It will. But still, it's on the west end of downtown. It's on a quieter block. People kind of forget about it. So what can we do to attract people over to that corner more often? So, are there other questions? Because I have a few questions that I like to ask the committee, just so we can do our job and move forward. And I want to make sure that I heard some things correctly.
Yes.
So,
Yes, go ahead. Oh, wait, excuse me. We have Committee Member Lindwall. Yes.
Hi, just two real quick things. First of all, under the workforce development, I think you also ought to be talking to the Cradle to Career group, because that's,
Yeah.
we're talking about careers here. And then second, I think that while I think closing off streets and some of the other ideas for events downtown, I think we have to be very careful because we have small businesses that are impacted. I've got one that I know of, one person operation, and she's got clients that can be disabled, so eliminating parking for the festivals means she can't see clients. So I think, Fountain Square is fine because that's what it's designed to do, but I think we need to be kind of at least sensitive that there are businesses that may be impacted by certain, activities, and I think we also ought to make sure that, the people who are benefiting, the vendors or whoever's operating the festival is not the one who's making all the profit. That the city is getting something back from the event.
Okay, thank you.
We do have one example of that, and I understand what you're saying.
Paul, I have Councilmember Kelly.
Great.
I just, to your point, Annie Coakley is surveying businesses, or she already did a survey, but I haven't seen the results yet, but about this. So we're trying to work very closely with the businesses surrounding Fountain Square.
Yeah. I will just say Custer Street Fair frequently was the least favorite weekend for many of the main Dempster businesses out of the year. And it was, whoever, the Fourth Ward Alderman and I heard about it every year. Yeah.
Right. I've often heard the Streets Alive is something that really bothers the merchants as well, just as a side note. So do you mind if I share?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. Observations are, so I really appreciate the feedback on consultants. Now, I want to stress, if we can get outside help, we have more going on kind of simultaneously. We have studies going on, we have engagement going on, we have recommendations happening, and then we can go on and implement it. So to the extent that we can use consultants to help us expedite, that would be really helpful to staff. Now, and I'm definitely, this idea of like selling the sizzle, so to speak, yeah, you couldn't have more dull kind of conversation about sending out the consultants, so I appreciate it. As exciting as we are as consultants, right? Like, I used to consult, but I definitely understand that. So, I do want to, I don't want to say I want to go back to the drawing board because that's not what you're asking, but I'm inspired by something that Councilmember Kelly talked about, and that's maybe I know several staff members who are brilliant, who would love to help on placemaking. Now, can they be released to do that type of work, right? So that's something I want to ask. Will we have the support of the council if somebody makes a recommendation that's a failure, right? There's often times where staff doesn't feel comfortable standing at this podium telling you how they tried something and it didn't work out, and it feels like a failure and you're wasting taxpayer dollars, and it can be intimidating. So if we can create an environment of trust and safety and allowing us to fail once in a while to really try this out, I think, I'll speak for myself, I would appreciate that. I've always felt support of this committee. But I think I'm going to assume that there are some staff members, especially in a public government kind of bureaucratic, risk-averse mindset, that people are probably a little bit afraid to step out of their comfort zone. So We love to, I'll speak for my entire team, we love that opportunity to fail, because, there's going to be some victories in there too. So that's that idea of an environment of innovation, acceptance of failure if it doesn't work out. I need clarification on this idea of a downtown study, because I think I hear two things. One, there's a retail study, and I think this might be part of what Mayor Biss will talk about in a moment, but there might be this aspect of a downtown study that's not just saying, here's leakage, here's, you've got an opportunity to collect $50,000 in furniture sales, right? So it's something different, tied together with how do we improve the physical plant of downtown. And I want to make sure that that's clear, because I think it's two different studies. There's a downtown planning study and a retail market study. So clarification on that would be good. Internal collaboration. The branding conversation is big. I could use a little help with clarifying that. I'm not talking about tonight. We can work on that. But there is an opportunity, and I'm going to take the chance while I'm standing here. I think there's an opportunity to collaborate and engage with the community in a different way, to figure out who we are as a community. What are we? Are we a suburb? Are we a village? Are we an urban center? I think we're all those things, but how do we blend it all together so we feel like we're rowing in the same direction on the crew boat? It's okay if people of different sizes and we're all working on that same race, rowing the boat. So I'm hoping that we can develop that idea further. I think it's really important. We're working on a smaller initiative. Annie Coakley is helping lead that with the CEO group, just to create kind of a smaller brand around attracting office. But I think we could do more. And then I think everything that we do moving forward, there's this idea of elevating. We need to elevate Evanston in a way that we've not done before. And I'll use an example of a street fair. We always see white tents at street fairs. Always. Our farmers market has white tents. We have art fairs of white tents. We can elevate that experience. We can have cool little kiosks. We could have, I've been really researching Bryant Park, this model of a nonprofit that funds the park, and it's a massive park, don't get me wrong, but they have really nice infrastructure. It makes you want to hang out there. If you think about Chris Kindle Market, you go down there because you want to hang out in the really cool gingerbready, town square. You can never do that during COVID, by the way. I mean, the people shoulder to shoulder. But people do that because it's a fun experience. If you put a bunch of white tents with hot chocolate, and it's not the same. So we have to think of how we can elevate everything that we do. Our art fairs could be better. Our music could be better. We have talented musicians. We have space. So let's always remember that as part of how we do our work. So I want to encourage that. And I'm not running for office, so I'll stop speaking. And I think that's it. And there's a lot of work that we need to do. I feel like my next step needs to be coming to council in 2 weeks with a proposal for a retail market study, for one.
I think that you heard that correctly. I think that there is general agreement on the retail study.
Okay.
The other issues I think we need to work on, need more discussion time.
Okay.
On.
By the way, workforce development, the conversations I had last week, and I want to stress this, what I'm planning to do is have a meeting and collaborate with all of the partners. And again, ask them what it is that they need. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe my gut's wrong on this. Maybe they've got it handled. I think we need somebody, but that's step one. Then we'll go from there.
Okay. Paul, I have two more council members here. First is Councilmember Kelly, and then Councilmember Burns.
So to respond to having staff get involved with innovative projects and not, and with the risk of failing, I think it's also just really important to collaborate with community. I can't tell you the encouraging and heartwarming emails I've received from residents saying, it means so much. I just moved to town to be partaking in, the improvement of my city means so much to me. So I think it's important that there's, that direction's given also to collaborate, because, and I can tell in just 3 months on this job that even a great idea, if it's done in isolation of the community, of any aspect of the community, it can flop even if it's wonderful. So I just think that's a really key piece. And I think I love the idea of staff and staff who wouldn't normally be involved in, placemaking, coming forward with innovative ideas and reaching out to aldermen and say, do you have any community members who'd like to sit down with me and let me, vet these ideas? I think that will go a long way. So I think it'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Burns?
Yeah, so one of my questions was answered, which was, do you need direction from us to move forward on the first recommendation? And I think we're saying, yes, we don't need to vote on that. It's fine.
Do we need to vote?
Oh, you know what? Yes, because this is a matter of, I appreciate
it's
that
an
as a
item
matter
for
of action.
consideration. Yeah.
I would also ask, this is, again, we started this last meeting, we're continuing it. We have to keep the flow of ideas going, and whether that's through your referral process or through the mayor or through the city manager, but we can't wait like 30 days each time to suggest ideas. So let's just keep doing it.
Right. Okay. Well, I think I would say in terms of ARPA money, Paul, I think the conversation has been opened. So I think if members of the committee have an idea, I think going ahead and talking to you and other members of the committee, I don't necessarily see that as having to go through a referral process, but
good point.
It's all part of the continuous conversation that we're having.
Right, I understand the council will be talking about it again on the 20th, if I'm not mistaken, but that's true, that's a really good point.
Yeah. Okay, so.
Another thing, so, and I just want to make sure that we're going to include the retail market study, and that will include the sub areas as well, because we went back and forth between. So I just wanted to make sure that's in place. Because I do think certain sub-areas have different needs, so I think a certain type of leakage study will benefit the Fifth Ward, especially because there are some cultural differences that impact how people shop, where people shop, and I would imagine what we'll find is some people not only we're losing them to other parts of the city, but they're leaving the city altogether to find products. So I do think there are some specific needs that I want to be really sensitive to in the Fifth Ward. And I think that's, us working with Paul just to be clear on what we're looking for out of this proposal, out of whatever contractor or consultant we work with. So I just wanted to be clear on those two things. And then as far as workforce, we need to stop overcomplicating stuff. Like, where are the jobs? To me, what's really exciting about lead pipe replacement is we have a 30-something year mandate, right, from the state. I went by, I was riding my bike one day and saw the parkway dug up, right? It was a 3-person job. You had an excavator, you had a crew leader, and you had somebody working the truck. Okay, so we know it's 3 people per job site over 30 years. How many jobs can we create? Did a little bit of research. They said, you know what, I think the city can train people to do the city side of the lead water service line. But you know what? We're not trained to do water main, and we're not trained to do the service valve to the water meter. Okay, so then the next question is, how much work is on the public side of those projects? But let's just figure out where the jobs are, what the training is that's required, who's going to do it, what is the cost, and get the money out as quickly as we can. But we know where these jobs are. Again, MEAC obviously is a good resource, but let's also talk to the job creators and just ask them, where do you need help? Where do you need people? And what type of training is currently offered, and how can we help you ramp that up? The next time we talk about this, I would just like some real concrete, we talk to this employer, they're saying this is where the jobs are, here's what they're missing,
That's why we need a staff.
Who is that, right? So that's.
And if it's a staff person, then I fully support it. And if we were going to vote on that today, I would support it because I just want to get it going. You know what I mean?
We'll
and if we need to take a vote on that today, let's.
But.
And I don't know if that's on us
Bobby,
because that's the city manager's.
I am supportive of getting somebody on staff because that's what I was saying before is we need someone who is bird dogging it every single day.
Okay.
And because relying just on the community, all of those people have other full-time jobs, other things in their lives. But if other communities have made this work, so that's why I support having either an intern or a part-time employee who's staying on the through line of doing this research, then making the next set of calls, and the next set of calls, and the next set. And where do you get that training? I mean, that's a lot of work to do that.
But that's not up to us here to make that, to give you that direction. That's more of a city manager hiring decision, right?
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, what I would ask is if you would like for staff to pursue, bringing something back to council that addresses a staffing need, I think I know what I need to do that. And I started that conversation last week with some workforce development partners that'll eventually, they know what the jobs are, and they have programs in mind. They need to know where the people are and how to bring the people to the jobs and bring the people to the training, then to the jobs. So I will gladly, with your direction, I don't think we need a formal vote on it, but I will gladly come to a future city council meeting with some kind of proposal or MWEB or however we want to do this to move it forward. Because again, I try to express this is what we need. It's a person.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, the mayor and I talked with North Shore. They told us they need X number of people. They gave us like a bunch of jobs that they will need to fill. Okay, I've got that information. I don't have the skill set, and I don't know the people who need the training, right? So if somebody was cultivating those and by the way, relationships are huge.
Right.
It's really
You
important.
need someone
That
who's
person-
talking to Oakton about the certification training that somebody needs to start working at the hospitals, because there are all of those things, those jobs in the hospitals. You don't necessarily need a college education, but you might need an associate's degree or some type of certification that allows you to do the job. But you need a person who's making all those connections.
Right, so what I would ask tonight is if you could direct staff, if that's what you want and the committee agrees, that we will come back, hopefully to council, with something that's actionable and implementable. That's both on the retail market study. I can come to the city council probably on the 27th with a request to initiate a proposal. In fact, I don't even know if I have to do that, right? I could probably just initiate an RFP for a market study and then come to council with the bids. I guess.
Well, I think that might be the cart before the horse, but.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to come to the committee.
I would just check with the city manager staff on that one. But, I mean, if that gets things moving faster, I would support that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I would ask tonight is if you could formally request staff to do those two things in a motion.
Okay, why don't we separate them?
Okay.
So would someone make a motion with respect to the retail study?
Sure.
Committee Member Lindwall?
I'll move that we direct staff to investigate or work to develop the plan to move forward with a retail market study and consultant RFP.
In all areas of the city?
In all areas, all business areas of the city.
I'll second it. Okay. Mr. Zelmistak, do you want to speak
Would
to
this, we're talking about ARPA money here, right?
Yes.
We've already started to spend ARPA money, and I would prefer not to spend more ARPA money until we know what our overall strategy is, until we have a framework and structure. I understand the proposal here will help us define that structure, and we're not voting on it at a council level tonight, but I want to just be very cognizant of nickel and diming the ARPA money on stuff like this and other stuff that is very important and very attractive, and we want to spend money on it. But we turn around in 6 months and half ARPA money is gone, and we haven't approached it strategically.
Good point.
And I have a suggestion, because I think that is a very good point. And what we might direct staff to do is to contact some retail market consultants and ask generally how much money we should be budgeting for this, given what we're talking about, which is essentially an assessment of the market study. Then you'll have a range to work with.
Right, and then the council could make the decision at that point, whether to move forward or not.
Yeah, because quite frankly, this kind of market study shouldn't take more than a few months. I mean, it should not be a year-long process. If it is, I would recommend going to somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Paul.
what I'd like to do is, I think, I like the direction that you're going with this. I think I could take it a step further, though, and literally, there's nothing preventing me from doing an RFP. It doesn't cost anything. Do the RFP, submit it for the council review to be considered during ARPA conversations, and you can approve it or not, right? So
Okay, I see
that's
that.
so we can not overcomplicate it tonight. And then I will do the same with workforce once I get there.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay, so we need to vote on. Yes, can you restate the motion?
Yes. The motion would be to direct staff to investigate the costs of a retail market assessment for all of the city's business districts and to develop a draft RFP for the council to review.
Second. So, Mr. Salmasak, would you call the roll on that?
I will as soon as I finish typing my notes. Okay. Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Member Lindwall.
Aye.
Member Deacon.
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Member Ogawa.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
All right, so that will, thank you, Jean. So next, the second thing that we need a motion on is to direct staff with respect to workforce. Would someone make that motion? All right, I'll move that we direct staff to come back to the council with an analysis of a full-time employee description to address workforce development.
We want coordination, maybe?
Workforce development and coordination. Thank you. I need a second.
Second.
Okay.
Who seconded? Thank you. Okay. Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Member Lindwall?
Aye.
Member Deacon?
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Member Ogawa?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. So, Paul, you have direction from us then?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Before
So-
we move on, I just want to say thank you to Paul for all the work
Yes,
that you've
absolutely.
done on this, and it might be a challenging time to be an employee for the city of Evanston through the transitions that we're going through, so thank you for bearing with us, and please keep it up.
Yeah,
Thank
second.
you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, so now we do have two more items for discussion. The first item is a referral from Councilmember Burns to discuss burying ComEd transmission lines in the 2nd and 5th Ward. And Councilmember Burns, did you want to address this, or Paul, are you going to be addressing this somewhat?
Well, I have to be honest, because this is a new process for this community, this referral process, and so we have two issues, or two referrals on the agenda. One was referred by, I was going to say Alderman Biss, but Mayor Biss, to discuss what he referred to as walkability of downtown, and I'll have him explain what that is, and it really ties into what we talked about earlier with placemaking and infrastructure. And then the second matter was ComEd utility line barrow, and I think we have to decide as a committee and a community how we want to listen to the referral questions, right? So should we invite the mayor to the podium to present his referral?
Yes, although
I'll have
we were
ComEd
gonna-
first. I don't recall my own agenda, so.
Right, yes,
so
that's
we
right.
could-
I think the first item that we were going to discuss of the referrals was the ComEd high-tension wire.
Right. So I will put the photos up on the screen so we can look at the site.
Right.
So I just need a minute to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. Councilmember Burns, did you want to start us off on this?
Yeah, well, I think it would be helpful to have the photo up.
Yeah.
So we might want to wait on that.
Right.
And then, but this will be a short item.
Yeah. There we go. So what we're looking at there is the ComEd, I don't even like calling it a substation because it doesn't it looks like a superstation on
Right,
Emerson.
exactly.
So do you want me to orient the group, or do
Yeah.
you want to go ahead and do that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so what I've depicted in the memo is what I'll call a ComEd substation. It's this area that I am drawing with my cursor. It is kind of surrounded by Robinson Bus Rental. Obviously, there are buses parked here. Robinson owns this property, and then this is the infamous Tape Coat property on both sides of Lyons. USPS Facilities Management, and then this is this is auto repair, and then this is I believe it's owned by the Robinsons, rented out for kind of used cars at one point. I don't know what it's used for today. But so this particular station is the beginning or terminus. You can see kind of, if this were 3D, I could probably also run through a Google map, but this is a tower. It's the first tower that then strings across and really kind of divides the east and west sides of the 5th and the 2nd wards, respectively. And arguably an eyesore. They do serve a purpose, obviously. They've been there.
And Paul, where that third
And
photograph is?
So this is a view looking south at the high school's power
Right.
station.
Mhm.
And this is the high school parking lot.
Right.
Looking east. And again, at the base of this is a vacated rail right-of-way that was, the Mayfair right-of-way. And then a couple more, just so you can see how this is distributed throughout the community. And then here we are again looking at the overhead lines on a really prime development site. This is Continental Construction. There's a lot of equipment stored here, a lot of cars. There's a roofing company here.
And orient us on that one?
And this is looking north. This is the high school power plant.
Okay.
And this would be viewed from Greenwood.
Mhm.
So to the east is Dodge, and that's it. So they're clearly kind of a visible scar on the community. But more from my perspective, putting the aesthetics aside, there's really several really good development opportunities that are impossible because of the infrastructure that's in place. So that's how I would set it up for you, and I don't know how you want to take it next.
Yeah, and I'll just expand that, especially around the Emerson and Lyons area to the substation. So to zoom all the way out, there were several decisions at some point in history made to use space, particularly in the 5th Ward, for what I would consider is not the greatest use. Even from this overhead, if you can go back to that, Paul. Are you going to try to pull it up in a different way?
Yeah, there. You can see how much
Yeah,
space
so
is-
even from the overhead, you can see, so this is around Emerson and Lyons. You can see that we essentially have a huge swath of land One of the uses is tape coat, creates accessories and coatings for oil pipelines. It's a site of concern for air pollution. So that's in this area, general area. Then we have the bus company. So essentially where we have an air polluter, we have a huge swath of land for parking, both for the U.S. Postal Service, maintenance, repair, location that we're now seeing. So it's basically this whole space is like parking lot, air polluter, and then the substation, and that's how we're using space. And then in other parts of the ward, we're using it for storage containers. It's just a terrible use of space. I would highly doubt that it's creating a lot of jobs and local employment opportunities. And so I just zooming all the way out. I'm not saying we don't need a substation, high power lines, but we need to find a better place for these to be. And I don't think it's right in the Fifth Ward in a residential area where we could benefit from more commercial, residential, retail, open space. I mean, for God's sake, the Emerson and Lyons location is right across the street from a senior home. And that would be a wonderful opportunity if they could walk across the street and have access to, again, a nice walk and bike path, a nice seating outdoor area, some better options, retail and commercial options. And so the question is, how do we, what do we do with this? It's a big problem. There's also obviously a cost associated with it. So, I think as a first step is reaching out to, one, just seeing who the point of contact is at ComEd, who could help us start to better understand what the cost to bury or relocate or reconfigure the substation area and how to deal with the transmission lines. We don't have anything right now. I know there was some previous efforts led by Councilmember Braithwaite to get numbers and to see what that cost would look like. And but I don't think it got far. I think there's still some work to do there. So if we can reach out to the external, I think it's the external affairs manager at ComEd, and schedule a meeting so that we can get numbers on how much it would cost and what can we do, what's realistic, what's not realistic, that's I think a good first step. Yeah. Unless
and
yeah,
if
go
I
ahead.
could
I'm
jump
sorry.
in, and thank you very much, Councilmember Burris, bring this back. So there actually, this conversation has been in front of this committee several years ago. So we have several different models, and I can forward those again, you, as well as the other committee members that we looked at in terms of a shared cost. I think it was $1 million per pole, and different models that show cost share for residents just by adding cents to their electricity bill. So I do agree getting in front of our new external affairs, and I know I have her email and contact information in my email address, who took over for those that have been on the committee. Alderman Nguyen would probably remember his name, Carlo Cabrera. I can't remember the woman's name, but I'll forward it. We'll look at the cost models, and I think it's definitely something that we would want to possibly utilize our ARPA funds. I realize that there are also funds at the Cook County level and maybe even at the state level. I think if it's going to happen, now would be the best time. But again, it's a heavy lift that's going to require focus and a lot of dedication of time if we're going to go down the path. That's the one thing that I would say.
And I just wanted to quickly add that this Emerson Street is a major truck route and thoroughfare. It has the Emerson and where it meets with Green Bay and Ridge and all that has the highest clearance. So many cars pass through here. Look at trucks right here. I mean, if we can do something different with this space, we really can take advantage of the high amount of vehicle and pedestrian just traffic that is going by here on a daily basis if we could better utilize this space.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Good point. All right, so, Paul, you will make the, reach out, I have Councilmember Newsma here.
Having spent 2 terms on the Utilities Commission, this is, straight up the alley of the Utilities Commission. So I know that the External Affairs Coordinator for ComEd does meet with the Utilities Commission regularly. I'm not suggesting we need to wait for that scheduled meeting, but Dave Stoneback of Public Works is in regular contact with ComEd, so we can have some ballpark answers fairly quickly, I would fully expect. To manage expectations, this is going to be somewhat less than $1 bajillion.
Right.
But not cheap. And what we're talking about here, this is a substation. The high overhead lines, high voltage lines go to the power plant that brings electricity to us here in Evanston. The substation then takes the high voltage down to lower voltages and sends it out to the smaller poles that go in our alleys. So we need something like this somewhere close by. It happens to be there. Could it be moved? Of course it could be moved. It depends on how financially feasible that is. And so let's have we'll get ComEd to tell us what the parameters are, and we'll have a fully informed discussion at that point.
Okay, and for the record, I have spoken with the government relations person for ComEd, and she is aware of this conversation tonight.
Okay, and I see Mayor Biss has his hand up. Mayor Biss, would you like to come forward? Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm, God knows, no expert on the subject, but I just wanted to put 2 more considerations on the committee's plate. The first is something that Councilmember Newsma is very well familiar with. The city is in the process of renegotiating our franchise agreement with ComEd. I had a pretty intense meeting with Kelly Gandersky and Kumar Jensen and some representatives from ComEd. I think they were surprised at how strong and aggressive a position we took. We believe that was the right position to take, and we have a very long list of asks, but I think making sure that this is on that list when we have our follow-up discussion with them would be certainly valuable. That won't happen until Kumar's replacement is here, because that person would be a key part of the negotiations, but it's something to keep in mind. The second thing, and to be clear, I am no expert on this, much to my chagrin, but the federal government is in the process of passing legislation that includes very significant funding specifically for electric grid modernization. One of the nation's foremost experts on the subject is Councilmember Kelly's next-door neighbor. I think I understand that this is now well in the weeds of kind of federal legislative affairs, that a community our size doesn't, it's not like we're Chicago, that we have a whole lobbying team in D.C., but it's worth figuring out however we can if some of that funding could be accessed for this, because your point is right. I mean, the dollar numbers we're talking about are going to require some help, and help from a government body that has a mint would be would be great.
Who could print the money for it?
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
Point well taken. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I hope it is still part of the negotiation. I know in talking to Kumar before he left, he said that was one of the items that was being considered as part of that renegotiation of the franchise agreement.
It absolutely is. It's just there's a I forget how many multi-page sort of list of bullets, and so I think we have to be prepared to prioritize as well, and to be clear with ComEd about how our hierarchy of priorities works out.
Well, ComEd should not be surprised, Mayor Biss, at that we are hard negotiators, because we have held their feet to the fire in each of the prior negotiations. It's probably just a different set of new people there who just need to learn again. So good luck, and please keep us informed of how things are going. Yes, Ms. Lynn.
I'll be quick. It is very expensive. About 20 years ago, I worked with a community that had a lot of high voltage lines going through, and they did look at trying to ask, ComEd to bury them, and it was prohibitively expensive. I just did a quick Google search, and it looked like, the cost I came up with is $750 a foot to bury the lines, which would work out to about $4 million a mile. Not to mention the fact that, some of the other concerns are, reliability. If it's harder to find a break underground than it is in the overhead line. So that's one point. With respect to, I think the other thing we ought to look at from the city perspective is who owns the land.
Right.
Is are the high voltage lines running on land that ComEd owns at this point? And with respect to the property fronting on Emerson, if that's privately owned, then that might be, a potential development site, which at least would screen the substation from view. So I think there are a couple of different avenues that should be approached.
Yeah.
ComEd would have an easement for the transmission lines themselves, or the distribution lines. I can check to make sure, but I'm fairly certain they own that property, or the.
Well, I'm sure they own the substation, and in many instances, they also will own they may have bought the Mayfair line, for example.
Right.
Rather than have an easement.
And, yeah, something like that. And certainly the old Mayfair right-of-way, they may have purchased that for those transmission lines over time. Be interesting to see who owns all of that.
And I just wanted to quickly say, I mean, we're grappling with terrible use of land space with the substation, tape coat, an environmental polluter, and a waste transfer station, all in a very tight area.
Yeah.
So no matter how it happened, it's not right. It's not acceptable. And but I think a good first step is starting with the numbers. But I just want to be clear. It shouldn't be here in the first place. It is. I don't know how it happened. But there's just too much going on, literally in a triangle area. You have a waste transfer station, you have the tape coat, you have, this substation, which, again, not to put the tinfoil hat on, but it is a hazard, a fire hazard. It is a hazard for radiation exposure and other things. I can get deeper into this, but, but yeah, I think a good first step is figuring out the numbers. Thank you.
Okay, good. Mayor Biss, would you like to make your presentation or speak to us about your referral?
Alderman Nguyen,
Yes.
before we move forward, can I just maybe formalize this so we don't lose sight of the importance and the timing? And
Sir.
I would love to, I've sent you all information, some previous numbers that probably need to be refreshed. I'm still passionate about it. There's Alderman Burns and possibly Councilmember Newsma and Ms. Lindwall may form a little subcommittee from our economic development just to make sure we check on the feasibility and stay focused to see if this is something that we can take advantage of just given the moment.
And this is.
And I would reach out to the external affairs, as well as Dave Stonebeck, who's familiar with this project, and just come back next month with our findings.
Okay, Councilmember Braithwaite, I think that's really important, and I agree. We need to get concrete information, and so that we can know what's an approach to take here. And Mayor Biss is right. There is this federal infrastructure bill that's out there, and we need to make sure we're lined up if there's a possibility of chipping off a small amount of that to get this, to address this. Yes, and I have Councilmember Newsma.
I'll just offer as a suggestion, the Utilities Commission, I believe, has a meeting scheduled for Friday, September 10th. Perhaps we could invite the ComEd representative to that meeting if they weren't scheduled to be there already, and have that discussion in a public forum.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
And then
can you shoot that date to everyone's calendar invite?
Yes. That Utilities Commission meets 7:15 on Friday mornings at or the second Friday, 7:15 in the morning at the water treatment plant.
Is that in person or in Zoom?
Last time I was there, it was in person, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Perfect.
Great. Thank you, Peter, for concretizing that.
Yep. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, now, Mayor Biss, would you like to just speak on the referral that you made? I think a lot of the discussion we were having earlier ties directly into what it sounds like your referral is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to thank the committee for your indulgence. I'll try to be really quick. You've all been at this for a long time. And exactly as you say, Madam Chair, this topic has been interwoven in a lot of what's come up today. I also want to thank Paul for all the work he's put in and echo Jonathan's comments that we have an economic development organization that's operating in a time of doubled work and significantly diminished staff capacity. So really, really appreciate all of the work that you're putting in, Paul. I simply, in keeping with a lot of what was said today, have a very strong interest in acknowledging that a lot of our downtown is designed very, very well to move cars quickly, and it's not as person-focused in its design. And I'm not an expert in this field at all, so I'm not coming with anything close to a specific proposal, but there's a very, very large menu of options, many of which were just mentioned tonight, especially, but not only by Councilmember Kelly, that I think are worthy of consideration. So that would include narrowing streets, widening sidewalks, beautifying sidewalks, making streets one-way streets, making streets, as Councilmember Newsma said, zero-way streets and closing them off leaving them for pedestrian and cycling traffic. Another option is scheduling periodic events that would occur downtown and close off the streets at particular times, especially when the weather is nicer. Other options are being more hospitable to cycling and scooters and other non-car forms of transportation. What I essentially am here to say is I think these are ideas that are out in the air that a lot of us are interested in, and I would love for the committee to figure out a plan to move from, hey, this is a collection of things that we all find attractive, to here's a plan to figure out which ones of them we believe to be feasible, logical. Here's a process to include the various stakeholders to have this discussion. As Member Lindwall indicates, that you want to have the various business owners at the table to ensure that you're not imposing from without an idea that sounds good to us but actually would not work for the people who are currently doing business in these areas, so that we can then move forward. And again, perhaps that's hiring a consultant, perhaps that's creating a task force that has members of this committee and Paul and people from the Community Development Department, perhaps it's something else, but I would love for us to move forward on this because I think there's a lot of benefit that the city could enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I agree with you, and I think placemaking needs to be very deliberate. And I've been to a conference about in Portland several years ago about the importance of the town square, and the whole theory behind that is if you look at cities in Europe and cities anywhere around the world, so much of it is focused on the town square and what can happen in the town square. And we have a lot of those elements in our town right now in terms of a gathering space. We spent that money for Fountain Square to finally renovate it after so many years of people saying it doesn't work, and it didn't work. And so there are so many features of Fountain Square that create our towns, make it a town square. There's the zero, there aren't any curbs anymore, so you can use the entire space. There's actually a water feature so that when it's working, that's actually a critical element in town squares. And so I think capitalizing on that and spreading that from that idea of going outward in terms of Fountain Square, in terms of, okay, how do we extend the feeling that we got with Fountain Square and programming it. And once again, before COVID, people were sitting out on those tables and having lunch every single day, and whatever the weather was. And Annie Coakley has Thursday dancing at Fountain Square before COVID. So, but we need to re-energize that effort, but then also make it spread. I agree with you. Make it spread out throughout all of our downtowns. So all of it is as tuned into placemaking as what we did with Fountain Square. So that widening sidewalks, slowing traffic down, ultimately reversing those two one-way streets, I think would be really important.
Thank you.
Did you want to say something, Councilmember Kelly?
I mean, can we move this evening for staff to begin to develop a referral for example, Fountain Square that we've done work on for Saturdays, say, at least start that process of looking at how that will impact traffic and cutting off what we've already discussed. You know what that area is, Paul, Davis Street and the two streets surrounding Fountain Square. For Saturdays, I think that's what we discussed, our group downtown. Can we begin that process tonight?
Sure. So Councilmember Kelly, I mean, the facilities were built to do that. It's just a matter of programming it and assigning somebody to do it and manage it and get Public Works to make sure that they're doing all those things, and police. And so, yeah, it's just a matter of programming it. That's what we're missing. I think we're missing a street closure program to do the.
So only programming?
Or
I mean, I think there's a lot more involved, right? I mean, in terms of rerouting traffic and.
No, that's what I'm saying, right? So if we're going to close the streets to do the programming that some of your constituents talked about, yes, there's a multifaceted effort within the city to do that. Police, Public Works, probably something else that I'm not thinking about.
Right.
So we just need to come up with a plan. If we want to do this on a weekly basis, what's the staffing plan? How is it done? How is police staff assigned? And it's not relying on Annie Coakley to run out there and put up barriers, right? I mean, it's like we've got to change the mindset of how we implement these elevated concepts that we've been talking about. So, again, I think this is really, it's capitalizing on this idea that the mayor's bringing forward and asking the city manager to direct staff to do the work to implement this. And if that means that we need to hire people or contract, I don't know. I'm not the person that assigns the staff, but that's what we need. We need people to do it.
Yeah. I think once again, the issue is this is this idea, but that we don't have enough staff right now to implement this. And there aren't enough people right now. But I also do think in terms of getting, and I'm not necessarily in favor of a consultant at this point, but consultants, we did do a streetscape consultant along Chicago Avenue quite a while ago, and that is the transformation gradually of Chicago Avenue. We had developed a template, and it has gradually been put in place as each parcel on Chicago Avenue is developed. And that template is still working very well on Chicago Avenue. But we did that with a consultant who walked the street, did lots of community outreach, and then developed a plan based on what everyone, their vision of what they wanted to see. Has it been finally completed? Not entirely, but it's so different than it used to be. But so I think there's real value in a consultant bringing us these ideas, because we don't have the staff to do that, or getting a group of community members. And Jean, I've talked too much, and
we do have a large group of community members.
No, I think that's important. I was going to just say, I think it's really important that we consider the various user groups. I mean, when you're talking about alternate modes of mobility, we've got, always have had an issue with bikes on the sidewalks in downtown Evanston, and we've got lots of seniors.
Right.
I actually, when I go downtown, I walk downtown because I'm close enough. And so I have not found that the one-way streets generate rushing traffic. I mean, the stoplights are timed so that's just never been an issue. So I, for one, am not necessarily in favor of getting rid of the one-way streets. I think that if anything, they tend to slow traffic because you have to kind of think about where you're going. So I would, I don't know that we want to be encouraging lots of skateboarders or even scooters, given the seniors and the kind of, population that we have downtown. So, but I think that we're not going to know that unless you have community conversations and you talk to the residents and the businesses and the shops.
Mm-hmm. Yes, go ahead.
So I just mean in terms of, so there are many components to this. I mean, can we begin, it doesn't mean we've decided tonight exactly how this will look, but we know, I mean, I think we know geographically. I'm just referring now to Fountain Square and sort of the First Ward and Fourth Ward, to begin to look at those streetscapes, those, pedestrian areas. And, I mean, with the staff we have, we can at least get some numbers and some idea in terms of.
Sure, I have very clear direction on what, yeah, I mean, that's what's really great about the committee structure is that we do the work. Sometimes it takes 3 hours, sometimes it takes an hour, but the work is, kind of doled out in this environment. So I've taken that and I'll do what I can. I won't be working on it, but I'll work on a team with making sure that we're collaborating and probably pulling in some of your community members to help. I think Annie is trying to show something. I'm not quite sure.
Annie, are you there?
Hi, no, I'm here. I thought it would be helpful because I had it handy, but this is our current Thursday night market street closure setup. So we only close Orrington from Davis to not even all the way to Grove. But we've done various, and I've shared all of these with Councilmember Kelly, like different setups for different larger scale events, and then this is just more of a smaller event. And I think this is what we had talked about at her community meeting out in the pouring rain, was doing this kind of layout for Saturdays. But I think she also wanted to maybe even close off Davis, but allow cars to turn right and go north on Orrington, but close Davis off.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I was just giving a visual, sorry.
We have Lisa Zekin.
I guess I'd like to get clarity on sort of what direction we're giving Paul based on the referral from Mayor Biss. And, back to my earlier point of making sure that we're not only coming out with a series of RFPs, I do think that looking at the infrastructure and how the infrastructure best serves or does not serve our built environment is an example, to your point, of, Jonathan, of using that money to invest, and that's a theme that we've heard, investing, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Infrastructure is certainly in sort of that built environment is a key place that we could do that. And so, we can look to these examples of Fountain Square, to Chicago Avenue, to some of these places where we have utilized a consultant to best determine how can the built environment, the infrastructure best serve us. So I would support something like that if we wanted to engage, see what those key arterials are, or, what are the, the very defined geography that we're looking at, and consider bringing in a consultant to look at that.
Yeah. Jonathan?
Half of my mind is on ComEd right now, so
Yes.
I'm only speaking with half a brain, but one-way street, two-way street, personally ambivalent. If it's zero-way street, I start to get excited. Otherwise, just for what it's worth, I'm not going to get wrapped around an axle on one-way versus two-way. But whatever we need to do to make downtown the destination that we need it to be, to take advantage of Northlight, the movie theater, and an advertising campaign that goes out regionally and draws people to Evanston because we have a cool slogan and we're a cool place to visit. Let's make the downtown live up to that expectation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
And I would just add that when we're talking about downtown, one of the comments that we heard from one of the members member Gallagher, was sort of leveraging our beachfront. That is a key part of the appeal of Evanston. And so when we're talking about, leveraging those assets, I want to make sure that we keep that on the table.
Oh. Okay. Yes.
I'm not sure if this is the time to bring this up, but parking. And expensive parking, prohibitive parking, punitive parking does not encourage biking and walking, just for the record. Everything I've seen, that's not a way to encourage greener. It's just a way to discourage people from coming downtown. And we're kind of known as sort of the mean parking city. So, and I don't know if this is the right time, if you want me to hold off, but I would like us to start the discussion about the possibility of a 2-hour, for just in the name of bolstering the recovery of our downtown, sort of a pilot program for 1 year of a 2-hour or 1 hour free parking.
Claire, I think that's, sorry, Councilmember Kelly. I think that's definitely something that we should look at. We all certainly hear a lot about that. And I do think that right now, when our downtown is not what it was, that is something that we should talk about. So could we put that on the next EDC meeting?
Okay.
Yeah, because I think we need to understand, once again, understand the numbers. I mean, looking at any number from COVID, during COVID, is going to be distorted, but given the fact that we now have a Delta variant, our downtown, I parked really easily in our downtown today. Admittedly, the Northwestern students aren't back, but I had a choice of 4 or 5 spaces on Sherman. That's not good. So I think we need to understand, what does that mean if we did a 1-hour parking? A number of years ago, we did an analysis of how long people shopped in our downtown, how much time they actually used. It was under 2 hours. I don't know whether they would change, that's changed now too, but that would be something, if we had any information now. Of course, now there aren't as many places to go, but so maybe 1 hour would lure people back, and that might be helpful.
Great.
So I will bring that back. I'll add that to the next committee agenda.
Yes.
Can I also recommend a consultant for I'm just kidding, for parking? I'm just kidding. We'll get Michael Rivera and his team to put a data set together, understanding that COVID, just to understand in a perfectly operating environment, what were the revenues? If we gave up an hour or 2 for free, what is that going to cost the city? Is it a way to attract people and businesses to come back to Evanston to recover from COVID, and we can plug budget gaps with ARPA? There's lots of ways to look at this. Or maybe there's a fee structure that if you're in a spot for longer than 2 hours, maybe the ticket's $30 instead of $25. I don't know. There's ways to do this. I'm not a parking expert.
Let's hear from Mike, because I know he's thinking about these things all the time. So
could we not just look at downtown? Could we look at some of, like, Central and
all business districts?
Main Street is kind of irrelevant right now, but maybe
it'll be put back together eventually.
Yes. Central and
I think for all
maybe
business
Dempster.
districts, right? I think we're talking about
citywide.
Yeah.
Well,
we should.
for business districts.
Yeah, business districts.
Yeah. All right, everyone, we are approaching the 3-hour mark, and I think we've done terrific work tonight. I want to thank all of you for all of the contributions, and in particular, Paul, I want to echo what Mayor Biss said. Thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing, and we know that you're just cloning yourself, and that's how this is happening. So thank you for that clone. If it's the clone tonight or the real you, thank you very much. Yeah.
I appreciate that feedback.
All right. Yes.
About the park, I would like to see, so along with what they're looking for, I'd also like to see, what if we had, 3-hour street parking spaces? What if we did a better job of letting folks know where the parking garages are? I doubt those are utilized in the way they could be. So, in addition to seeing what free parking would do, I also would like to see what else we can do to maybe extend hours at the street level. How can we direct people to our parking garages? So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Good thought.
If I can also chime in, parking is an issue that I pay a lot of attention to, and have done a lot of reading on from folks like Jeff Speck, and others. There's the cost of the hidden cost of free parking by I think a guy named Doug Shoup. And I think, and I've spoken to Mike Rivera on this particular topic a number of times, and I think we've grown a fond friendship because of that, because of our shared passion for parking. And I think what we can do the studies, but I think what it'll show is that free parking is not good for either the businesses nor the city as a corporation in and of itself. And so I'll just echo what Councilmember Burns said, that I believe we really need to focus on how do we get folks to use our parking garages, how do we get folks to use alternative modes of transportation, rather than investing even more money into the costly and endeavor that is car-focused mobility. And so I'm hoping we can really get smart about this and start to look toward the future, as opposed to digging deeper and deeper into a hole that has proven that is unsustainable.
Right.
Thank you.
I have two people, and Councilmember Reed, yes, that we have, I have that book at home on my shelf, and I've read it. And part of why our parking rates are high was because the analysis is that drives you into the parking garages where we actually do have 1 hour free. So those are all really important things that we need to look at. And I agree, the more we get people out of their cars, the better off we all are. I have Councilmember Kelly, and then I have Paul Salmazek, and then we are 10 seconds to 9.
So very quick, we're in a moment of recovering from a pandemic, so everything needs to be approached also in that context. And furthermore, the study, it will be from doing this, a pilot, this will be what we'll be able to look at to see if this helps or not. We haven't done this for a year, tried this, and that's the idea of this, to look at this and see what it does do in terms of what sort of revenue, sales tax revenue this would bring. We'll only know if we try it. Then we'll be able to see the results.
Mm-hmm. Paul,
Thank
you have
you.
the last word.
Thank you. So on September 22nd, on my proposed agenda, I had referral for ComEd power lines, check. Referral for walkability, done. Construction COVID grant, we already talked about that. So I had 3 things, one of which was a presentation from CMAP, a really good parking presentation from a really good CMAP planner. And I'm hoping that maybe we can devote some time with this presentation, and it'll be a little better than just having Mike read data. So let me build that agenda.
Okay.
And I thank Annie for reminding me that I had that on my upcoming meetings. There's also a potential 6B for Ward Manufacturing. They want to renew that, and we'll push off the Special Service Area 101 education session
Yes.
that I wanted to do for another meeting. So
We already have a very large plate that's very full.
Yes.
So seeing no more issues, I call the meeting to adjournment.